So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Disney Princess? So let's start the series. The air tasted of honeysuckle and silent screams. Naruto Uzumaki ran. He wasn't sprinting across familiar training grounds or forest canopies. This forest swallowed sound. Moss, thick as a corpse's shroud, muffled his footsteps. Trees weren't trees, they were pillars in a cathedral of perpetual twilight, their branches woven into a lattice that strangled the sky. His breath sawed in his throat, a raw, wet counterpoint to the eerie quiet. His left side was a tapestry of pain, a deep gash from a thorn that had moved, a burn from sap that hissed like acid. Chakra, his ever-faithful energy, flickered within him, confused. Here, it felt heavy, syrup-thick, resisting his call. He didn't know how he'd arrived. One moment, the sterile silence of his Hokage office, the weight of a world rebuilt but still so lonely pressing on his shoulders. The next, a vortex of color and soundless noise, and then, falling into this storybook hell. A whisper of movement to his right. He dropped, rolling behind a giant, gnarled root. Something sleek and silver, with too many legs, skittered past, leaving a trail of frost on the vibrant moss. This place was beautiful. That was the horror of it. It was the most beautiful place he had ever seen, and it wanted him dead. Why? The question was a drumbeat in his skull. He was a stranger here. An intruder. The forest knew it. The very magic in the air, a scent of ozone and old roses, rejected his sunbright chakra. Another desire, deeper than the need to survive, ached in his chest: connection. To see a friendly face. To hear a voice that wasn't a predatory whisper. The loneliness he'd carried since childhood, a cloak he thought he'd shed with his title and family, slammed back into him with the force of a tailed beast. He was utterly, profoundly alone. A shimmer ahead. Not a monster. Light, pure, liquid moonlight, filtering through a break in the woven canopy. It illuminated a small clearing where the flowers glowed with their own soft, blue bioluminescence. An escape? A trap? Barrier, his instincts, forged in war, screamed trap. But his heart, that stubborn, hopelessly optimistic muscle, yearned for that light. It was the first thing in this world that didn't feel actively malicious. Risky choice. He pushed off the root, ignoring the flare of agony in his side, and broke into the clearing. For a moment, he just breathed the cool, sweet air filling his lungs. Then he saw her. She stood in the center of the moonlight, and for a disorienting second, Naruto thought he was hallucinating. She was dressed in a gown the color of midnight dusted with starlight, simple yet regal, flowing around her like water. Her hair was black as a raven's wing, a stark frame for a face of porcelain grace. But it was her eyes that held him, wide, intelligent, and a shocking, vibrant green that saw too much. She wasn't smiling. She was staring at him with the cautious intensity of a strategist assessing a new, volatile piece on a board. A Disney princess. The thought was absurd, out of place, and yet utterly undeniable. But this was no singing maiden waiting for a songbird. Her posture was straight, her hands clasped loosely before her, but power hummed around her, a different frequency than chakra, older, woven into the song of the forest itself. "You are bleeding," she said. Her voice was low, melodic, but devoid of warmth. A statement, not a concern. Naruto straightened, forcing a grin that felt cracked on his face. It's just a scratch. Believe it." She didn't react to his catchphrase. Her green eyes flickered to the tree line behind him. "The gilded thorn hunts you. Its venom turns blood to crystal. You have minutes, not hours." The pain in his side twisted colder. He glanced down, saw a faint, crystalline sheen creeping up the edges of the wound. Consequence. "Great," he muttered. "So, nice place you got here. A little stab happy, but the scenery's top-notch. You should not be here," she continued, taking a step closer. The moonlight seemed to cling to her. "You are a tear in the tapestry. A wrong note in the song. Your energy, it burns." There was a flicker in her eyes, not fear, but a deep, resonant conflict. Curiosity battling a deep-seated duty. "My name's Naruto Uzumaki." He offered it like a peace treaty, one hand pressed to his crystallizing wound. "I'm kinda lost." "I know what you are," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "A man of sunlight in a world of reflected moonlight." She hesitated, and in that hesitation, Naruto saw it, her own emotional desire. A yearning so profound it was a shadow in her brilliant eyes. A desire for something real. Something not dictated by the silent, gilded rules of her realm. A howl, beautiful and terrible, echoed through the trees. The thorn was closing in. Barrier. Her duty was clear. She was the guardian of this glade, this realm. The law was absolute. Intruders unravel the magic. They must be expunged. Let the forest claim him. It was the order of things. Risky choice. She looked from the dying, grinning stranger to the violent darkness of the woods. His eyes were the blue of a summer sky she'd only seen in dreams. He bled sunlight. And he looked at her not as a princess or a power, but as a person. A lifeline. With a swift, fluid motion, she raised her hand. Not at him. At the ground between them. Vines, sleek and silver, erupted, weaving into a dense, living wall facing the approaching hunt. Then she stepped forward into his space. The scent of her was winter roses and old parchment. "My name is Elara," she said, her voice urgent now. "And if you wish to live, you must be silent, and you must hold still." Before he could question, she placed her cool hands on either side of his face. Her touch was electric. It wasn't chakra. It was a deeper magic, the magic of story, of essence. It flowed into him, cool and soothing, seeking the burning, foreign energy within him and gently tucking it away, hiding his sun-bright chakra under a layer of her own moon-drenched power. The crystallizing wound on his side slowed, the sheen receding like frost before a flame. The howl was at the edge of the clearing. A creature of gleaming gold and wicked thorns slid into the moonlight, mandibles clicking. Elara turned, placing herself subtly between Naruto and the beast. She raised her chin. "He is under my protection," she announced, her voice ringing with an authority that brooked no argument. "He is a lost ward of the court. The glade claims him." The thorn hesitated, clicking softly. It sensed the lie. It smelled the fading trace of sunlight under the moonlight. But to challenge her here, in her own glade, was to challenge the ancient magic itself. With a final, discordant shiver, it melted back into the shadows. Silence returned, heavier than before. Elara's shoulders dropped a fraction. The display of power had cost her. She turned back to Naruto, her expression unreadable. "The masking will not last long. Your energy fights mine. It is too vital." Naruto, still reeling from her touch, from the sheer presence of her, managed a nod. The immediate danger was past, but a new one had taken its place. He was now bound to this mysterious princess. Her lie had made him her responsibility. Her burden. "Why?" he asked, the single word loaded. "You didn't know me. Why protect me?" Elara looked away, towards a path that glimmered into existence between the trees, leading to a distant, slender spire that pierced the canopy. Her home. Her cage. "Because," she said softly, "you looked at me like I was a person, not a princess. And no one has done that in a very, very long time." She met his eyes again, and the conflict was back, now tinged with a forbidden spark of shared understanding. "Come. The court will have felt the disturbance. We must be gone before they send more than thorns." He fell into step beside her, his stride uneven. Every movement sent a fresh spike of cold pain through his side. The moonlit path was deceptively smooth, the air growing cooler, sweeter. "This court," Naruto grunted, trying to focus on anything but the pain and her proximity. "They're your people? They'll help?" A faint, bitter smile touched her lips. "The court of the unseen moon is not people as you know them. They are permanence. Tradition. A story written 1,000 years ago, refusing to reach its final page. And no, they will not help. To them, you are a stain. A chaos factor. And you? What am I to you?" She stopped walking. They were at the edge of a silverwood grove, the spire much closer now, its smooth surface drinking in the moonlight. She faced him, and in the dappled shadows, she looked younger, older, infinitely wearier. "A mistake," she said, the word leaving her lips with a gentle finality that hurt more than the thorn's venom. "A beautiful, impossible mistake. My duty is to the stability of this realm. Bringing you to the spire is the greatest treason I have ever committed." Micro cliffhanger, the word treason hung in the air. Naruto saw the weight of it on her. This wasn't a game. Her life, her position, everything was on the line for a stranger. "Then let me go," he said, the Hokage in him surfacing, the protector who would never see another harmed for his sake. "Point me to a border, a rift, anything. I'll take my chances." "You would die," she stated, no room for doubt. "Your energy is a beacon now. The masking is already fraying." As if to prove her point, a tiny spark of golden chakra escaped the seal on his shoulder, dancing in the air between them before winking out. She watched it fade, her green eyes haunted. "And I find I do not wish to see that." Risky choice, she reached out, but this time not for his face. Her fingers brushed the edge of the crystallized wound through his torn shirt. A jolt went through both of them. For him, it was a shock of cold relief, the crystal receding further under her direct touch. For her, it was a gasp, a sharp intake of breath as his suppressed chakra reached for her, not with violence, but with a desperate, innate warmth. It was the warmth of a hearth fire, of a summer noon, things this moon-drenched world had forgotten. She snatched her hand back as if scalded, clutching it to her chest. Her eyes were wide with alarm, and something else. Terror. What are you? She breathed. Just a guy, Naruto said, his own heart hammering. The brief contact had done something. It hadn't just healed, it had connected. A thread, gossamer thin and terrifyingly strong, now thrummed between their very essences. A guy who's really bad at following keep-out signs. A bell tolled in the distance, a sound that vibrated in the bones, not the ears. Elara's head snapped toward the spire. Panic, sharp and clear, flashed across her features. The Lunara Veil, she whispered. The court assembles. They know. She made a decision, her jaw tightening. There is a place. A hidden garden at the spire's root, woven from my own magic. It is the only space that is truly mine. It may hide you a little longer. She grabbed his wrist. Her grip was firm, desperate. But you must promise me. Do not speak. Do not let your energy flare. The walls there have ears, and the shadows have eyes. He looked down at her hand on his wrist, her pale fingers against his sun-weathered skin. A contrast. A connection. Barrier. Worlds collided at that point of contact. Duty versus freedom. Moon versus Sunday, story versus chaos. I promise, he said, and he meant it. She led him not to the spire's grand entrance, but to a cascade of weeping willows whose leaves chimed like glass. With a murmured word, the branches parted, revealing a narrow, mossy stair spiraling down into the earth. The air grew warmer, hummed with a different magic, lonelier, softer. Her magic. The hidden garden was a sigh of defiance. Here, the flowers were not blue and silver, but bursts of crimson, gold, and vibrant purple. A small, clear spring bubbled in the center, and the light came from glowing fruits that hung from delicate vines. It was a fragment of a different story. Sit, she instructed, pointing to a flat stone by the water. The thorn's venom is still in you. My masking slowed it, it did not stop it. Naruto sank onto the stone, exhaustion finally winning. He watched as she knelt by the spring, cupping water in her hands. She whispered to it, her breath fogging the surface, and the water took on a pearlescent sheen. This will hurt, she warned, moving toward him with the glowing water. Used to it, he grunted. She pressed the water-soaked edge of her sleeve to the wound. Agony, sharp and cleansing, lanced through him. He bit back a cry, his fists clenching. But as the pain crested, it broke, washing away into a profound, deep warmth. The last of the crystal dissolved. The torn flesh knitted together, leaving only a silvery scar. The process strained her. She swayed, the color leaching from her face. Instinctively, Naruto's hand shot out, steadying her by the shoulder. Micro cliffhanger. The moment his bare skin touched hers, without the barrier of clothing, without the crisis to distract them, it happened. His chakra, responding to her depletion, to her proximity, to the raw vulnerability of the moment, slipped its leash. Not a burst, but a gentle, steady flow. A transfusion of golden, life-giving energy from his system into hers. Elara's eyes flew open. A sound escaped her, a shuddering, overwhelmed sigh. The fatigue vanished from her features, replaced by a radiant, stunned vitality. His energy didn't just restore, it illuminated. For a second, a corona of soft sunlight seemed to halo her, making the midnight of her hair and gown seem deeper, her green eyes incandescent. But the effect on the garden was immediate and catastrophic. The vibrant flowers around them shuddered. The gold ones blazed brighter, the red ones pulsed like coals. The gentle, moon-fed vines recoiled, their leaves curling. The very air crackled with a dissonant, beautiful harmony, sun and moon, singing a duet that had never been written, a song that threatened to unravel the careful, lonely weave of her sanctuary. She tore herself away from his touch, stumbling back. Stop! You must stop! Naruto clamped down hard, sealing his chakra with a force that left him dizzy. The golden light faded. But the damage was done. The garden was changed, charged with a new, hybrid energy. And high above them, through the open ceiling of the grotto that looked up to the spire, a dozen new windows flickered to life. The court was awake. And they were looking down. Chapter 2, The Court of Echoes and Embers. The silverwood door to the spire was a mouth. Carved into its seamless surface was a serene, sleeping face, lips parted just enough to form the entrance. As Elara approached, holding the chain of Naruto's manacle, the wooden eyes slid open. Pupils of polished opal stared down, unblinking. The ward returns, the door murmured, its voice the sound of rustling leaves. And brings a spark to the hearth of silence. Does the mistress of the glade vouch for this flame? Elara's grip on the chain tightened, not to control, but to ground herself. I present the anomaly. He is contained. I seek the court's wisdom on this, unexpected guest. The opal eyes shifted to Naruto. He felt the gaze like a physical pressure, a probing chill that sought the heat beneath her masking magic. It lingered on the silvery scar on his side, on the places where his skin still hummed with residual warmth. Contained. The door repeated, skepticism a faint breeze through the grove. The song is discordant. Enter and be judged. The mouth door swung inward without a sound. Inside, the spire was a hollow needle of impossible space. Naruto's breath caught. The exterior had been slender, but the interior was vast, a cylinder stretching up into dizzying heights where faint, captive stars twinkled in a ceiling of dark crystal. The walls were not stone, but living, flowing murals made of moonlight and shadow, depicting a history of eternal twilight, graceful dances, and silent, unchanging rituals. The air was cold, scented with frost and forgotten incense. In the center of the vast floor stood the court. They were not seated on thrones, but on slender, floating discs of mother-of-pearl that drifted slowly in a lazy orbit. There were 12 of them. They were beautiful in the way a perfectly carved ice sculpture is beautiful, flawless, serene, and utterly devoid of warmth. Their features were elegant, elongated, their skin tones ranging from alabaster to dusky blue, their hair flowing like liquid silver, starlight, or deep space. Their eyes were all the same, pools of calm, reflective gray, like still water under a moonless sky. Elara led Naruto to the center of the open space and bowed her head. Honored aunts, revered uncles. I have brought the disturbance. The chain in her hand was a lie. Naruto felt it. She held it loosely, a symbolic tether, not a restraint. He played his part, standing straight but allowing a slight slump, a mask of weary confusion over the Hokage's sharp observation. One of the figures, a woman with hair like a cascade of frozen starlight, drifted forward. Her gown was woven from spider silk and shadows. Elara, our most dutiful child. The glade sang of violence. Then it sang of protection. The song changed. Explain the variation. Elara's voice was steady, a practiced melody. The intruder fell through a rift in the veil. He was attacked by the gilded thorn. I intervened to preserve the glade's sanctity. His energy is foreign, potent. Subduing him required a significant expenditure. I contained him to study the anomaly and present him to you. Barrier, the story was thin. The court's gray eyes saw everything and gave away nothing. A male figure, his form seemingly carved from polished obsidian, spoke. His voice was the grinding of tectonic plates, deep and slow. Study? Or shelter? His gaze pinned Naruto. Your essence is solar. Primordial. It does not belong in the choreography of the moon. You are a wildfire in a library of illuminated manuscripts. Naruto met his gaze. I didn't ask to be here. I'm just looking for a way home. Home, repeated the starlight-haired woman, Aunt Celine. A concept of transience. Here, there is only permanence. The story is written. You are an ink blot on the page. Emotional desire, in their cold, assessing stares, Naruto felt it again, the profound, aching loneliness. This was a loneliness of a different breed. Not the loneliness of being shunned, but the loneliness of being a single, discordant note in a symphony of perfect, endless harmony. He desired not just to escape, but to be seen. To be recognized as something other than a mistake. He is not malicious, Elara said, the words slipping out before she could temper them. All 12 pairs of gray eyes swung to her. You speak for the spark, daughter? Asked Celine, a hint of frost entering her tone. Risky choice, Elara lifted her chin. I speak of what I observed. He fought only to preserve his life. He shows curiosity, not conquest. His energy is chaotic, yes, but it is alive. In a way our harmonies have forgotten. A ripple went through the court. The floating discs paused in their orbit. The word alive hung in the cold air like an accusation. Forgotten? The obsidian man, Uncle Oberon, intoned. We have perfected stillness. The story is complete. Life, in its untamed form, is suffering. It is change. It is end. And what is this? Elara gestured subtly to the static murals on the walls. If not a different kind of end? Silence. Profound, utter silence. Naruto realized Elara had just crossed a line far more dangerous than harboring an intruder. She had questioned the foundational truth of their world. Consequence, Celine's disc drifted down until she was level with Elara. She reached out a hand, cold and pale, and cupped Elara's cheek. It was a gesture that should have been maternal. It felt like an autopsy. You have been too long in your garden, child. You listen to the dreams of flowers, not the wisdom of the moon. Her gray eyes narrowed, looking deeper. And something else. Your song, it has a new overtone. A warmth. Her thumb brushed Elara's cheekbone, right where Naruto's chakra had flowed into her. Celine's eyes widened a fraction. You have been touched by it. The fire has marked you. Elara recoiled, but it was too late. The truth was out. Oberon raised a hand. The anomaly is a corruption. It seeks to spread. To rewrite. It must be extinguished, and the page cleansed. His gaze fell on Naruto. The method is extraction and dispersion. We will unwind your light, thread by thread, and let it dissipate into the endless night. A painless unmaking. Naruto felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. This wasn't an execution, it was an erasure. No! The word tore from Elara, raw and fierce. She stepped in front of Naruto, the chain going taut. You speak of permanence, but this is stagnation. He is not a corruption, he is a possibility. A note we have never heard. And who are you? Oberon's voice boomed. To speak of possibilities? You are the keeper of the glade. Your duty is preservation, not innovation. Your role in the story is set. Micro cliffhanger. Elara turned her head, her green eyes meeting Naruto's. In them, he saw the walls of her gilded cage finally, fully shatter. She saw his loneliness reflected back at her, and she recognized it as her own. Duty and desire warred, and desire, for the first time, won in a blaze of defiant green fire. Then perhaps, she said, her voice clear and ringing in the vast chamber. My story needs rewriting. She dropped the chain. The silver manacle around Naruto's wrist fell away, clattering on the floor, a meaningless prop. The masking magic she'd woven around him dissolved like mist in sunlight. Naruto Uzumaki stood revealed. Golden chakra, pure and untamed, burst from him not in an attack, but in a reflexive, protective surge. It wasn't the furious cloak of the Nine Tails, but the steady, brilliant glow of his own immense power, a miniature sun igniting in the heart of the moon's palace. The court recoiled. The floating disc skittered back. The murals on the walls sizzled and recoiled, the shadows fleeing from the light. The cold, perfect air grew warm. You choose the flame over your family, child? Selene hissed, her serene beauty cracking into something sharp and ancient. I choose truth over a pretty lie, Elara shot back. Her own magic rose around her, not the cool silver of the moon, but the deep, verdant green of life force, of the hidden garden, magic that had been waiting, dormant, for a catalyst. His sunlight fed it, and it rose to meet him, not in conflict, but in harmony. A dance of sun and chlorophyll. Oberon snarled, a sound like cracking stone. Then you are both anathema. The story will continue. Without its wayward daughter and the blot of light. He raised both hands. From the flowing murals, shadows detached, not mere absences of light, but solid, hungry things with teeth of fractured crystal. The Thornkin. They flowed across the floor towards the center. Risky choice, Naruto didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, placing himself shoulder to shoulder with Elara, not behind her. We're leaving, he stated, as if announcing the weather. The spire has no exit for those the court denies, Elara said, her hands weaving, calling roots from the seamless floor to trip the advancing shadows. Then we'll make one. Naruto grinned, that old, reckless grin that had broken 1,000 fateful decrees. He formed a single, familiar hand seal. Believe it! Multi-shadow clone jutsu. Poof. Poof. Poof 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 poof. 100, 200 Narutos in orange and black exploded into existence, filling the vast chamber with noise, movement, and overwhelming, chaotic, golden energy. The court's perfect composure shattered into open-mouthed shock. This was not just power, it was the very essence of change, of multiplicity, of unpredictable life. It was everything their still world feared. Find a way out! The original Naruto yelled. The clones didn't need telling. They were a tsunami of intent. They scaled the flowing murals, their chakra making the images boil. They tested the walls, the floor, the very air. They swarmed the Thornkin, not with deadly force, but with sheer, bewildering numbers, grappling, distracting, shouting. In the beautiful chaos, Naruto grabbed Elara's hand. Her skin was warm now, humming with shared energy. Your garden, he said urgently. The way we came in. Can you close it behind us? She nodded, dazed by the glorious, terrifying bedlam he had conjured. Yes. But it leads only back to the glade. They will surround us. One problem at a time. They ran, not towards the mouth door, which was now sealed with solid wood, but back the way they had come, towards the servants' passage that led to the hidden stair. A contingent of clones formed a living, shouting barricade around them, holding off the Thornkin and the now incandescently angry court members, who were weaving complex, chilling spells of binding starlight. They burst into the hidden garden. It was still changed, the sun-touched flowers blazing defiantly. Elara didn't pause. She ran to the spring, plunged her hands in, and sang a single, resonant note. The walls of the grotto trembled. The mossy stair behind them began to collapse, the earth swallowing the entrance. They will just send hunters through the glade, she panted, as the last of the clones in the spire dispelled, flooding their minds with the sight of the gathering, furious court. Naruto looked around the small, vibrant space, his mind racing. His eyes fell on the spring, on the way the light from the glowing fruits refracted in the water. An idea, insane and brilliant, struck him. It was a hunch, a feeling in his chakra coils. "Your magic," he said, turning to her. "It's tied to this place. To life. To growth. Mine is tied to people. To bonds." She stared at him, not understanding. "Micro cliffhanger," he pointed to the spring. "A rift brought me here. What if we don't find a door? What if we make a window? Not with my power alone, or yours. But with both. A bond strong enough to punch a hole between stories." Elara's breath hitched. "The backlash could unmake us both. Or create a tear that consumes this whole realm." "Or," Naruto said, his hand still holding hers, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, "it could lead somewhere new. A place not bound by their story. A choice. Our choice." From above, they heard the sound of the spire groaning. The court was turning its full attention on the hidden garden, preparing to peel it back like the skin of a fruit. Chapter 3: The Blooming Between. The world dissolved into a roar of color and silent vibration. It wasn't like falling. It was like being unraveled. Threads of emerald and gold, of moonlight and sunlight, of story and shinobi will, spun around them, through them, tying their essences together in a desperate, screaming braid. Naruto's mind was a storm of sensation. He felt Elara's magic, not as an external force, but as a landscape within his own chakra coils, deep, quiet forests, the patient pressure of roots in stone, the sweet ache of a blossom unfurling. He felt her terror, sharp as a thorn, and beneath it, a wild, singing exhilaration she had never dared name. She, in turn, was drowning in him. His energy was a supernova contained in flesh, a boundless, stubborn warmth that spoke of ramen steam and worn training grounds, of lonely nights staring at a distant monument, of the roar of a crowd and the quiet comfort of a family home. It was chaotic, emotional, gloriously messy. It was everything her ordered, static existence was not. "I can hold," her thought reached him, a whisper in the maelstrom. "Don't hold." His mental voice was a shout and anchor. "Push. Imagine a door. A window. Anything but here." Together, in the eye of the self-created storm, they did not imagine a door. They imagined a seed. A point of potential. A tiny, hard kernel containing an entire forest, an entire world of choices not yet made. They poured their combined longing into it, his for belonging, hers for freedom. Their barrier, the crushing destiny of the court, the alien nature of their worlds, became the very shell they sought to crack. With a soundless pop that resonated in their bones, the vortex spat them out. They landed in a tangled heap on something soft and fragrant. The roaring silence was replaced by a gentle, pervasive hum. Naruto gasped, the air sweet and thick in his lungs. He pushed himself up, his body aching not from injury, but from profound metaphysical exertion. They were in a meadow. But it was a meadow from a dream, or a memory of a dream. The grass beneath them was a lush, velvety purple, sprinkled with tiny, glowing white flowers that pulsed like slow heartbeats. The sky was a perpetual, gentle twilight, a blend of peach, lavender, and deep blue, with no visible sun or moon. In the distance, forests of crystalline trees shimmered, and mountains of what looked like stacked, rainbow-hued glass caught the soft light. The air hummed with latent magic, but it was a neutral magic, curious and watchful, not hostile. "Where?" Elara whispered, sitting up. Her midnight gown was smudged with purple pollen, her raven hair in disarray. She looked more real, more vividly her than she had in the sterile spire. Naruto scanned the horizon, his senses stretching. No immediate threats. The chakra here felt different, malleable. It responded to his probe not with rejection, but with a kind of mimicry, a playful echo. "I don't know," he admitted. "But it's not your court. And it's not trying to kill us. Yet." He offered her a hand. She looked at it, then at his face, and after a heartbeat's hesitation, placed her hand in his. He pulled her to her feet. Their hands didn't separate immediately. The connection forged in escape still thrummed between their palms, a quiet, live wire. Emotional desire, in the sudden, immense quiet, their desires shifted from sheer survival to comprehension. He desired to understand this place, to find a way to control their situation. She desired to understand him, the catalyst who had shattered her world and offered a terrifying new one. Barrier, but the barrier was immediate and internal. They were refugees, bound by necessity, not trust. He was a warrior from a world of hard truths and harder fights. She was a princess from a world of soft lies and gentle decay. How could they possibly speak the same language? "Your clones," she said finally, releasing his hand to brush pollen from her skirts, a nervous, regal gesture. That power, it was not just multiplication. It was a fracturing of self that remained whole. Each one was you, yet not you. It defies the law of singular existence. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, well, it's handy for cleaning the house, too. At her bewildered look, he chuckled, the sound strangely loud in the quiet meadow. It's a jutsu. A technique. I use my chakra, my energy, to make temporary copies. They're all me, they know what I know, and when they pop, I get their memories and experiences back. Her green eyes were wide with a scholar's fascination. A technique. You learn to defy ontological unity? As one learns to sew or sing? I guess? Took me years to get it right. He frowned, a new thought striking him. Your magic, it feels older. Like it's part of the air here. You don't mold it, do you? You asked it. She nodded slowly, walking a few steps into the purple grass, her fingers trailing over the glowing blossoms. They brightened at her touch. It is a conversation. A negotiation with the essence of things. The court sought to freeze the conversation into a single, repeating stanza. My garden, it was a verse I whispered for myself. She looked back at him. What we did, that was not a conversation. That was a duet. A very loud, very reckless duet. Risky choice, Naruto sat down on a large, warm, moss-covered stone. We need to figure this place out. Find water shelter. See if we can. I don't know, feel a way back home. Or to somewhere safer. He paused. You can go back, you know. Tell them I overpowered you. They might believe it. Elara stiffened. She turned to face him fully, the soft light etching the determined lines of her face. Do not. Do not what? Do not offer me a coward's exit, she said, her voice low but fierce. I dropped the chain. I called their eternity a lie. I chose the vortex. That choice stands. I am adrift. But I am not sorry. She took a step toward him. And you are not a burden to be shed for convenience. You are my... She searched for the word. Co-conspirator. A slow, genuine grin spread across Naruto's face. It wasn't his believe it grin. It was softer, more real. Co-conspirator. I like that. Consequence, their fledgling partnership, forged in crisis, found its first stable ground in that meadow. But the consequence of their desperate escape soon made itself known. As they began to explore, they found the realm was not empty. It was between. They discovered it subtly. A stream they found flowed uphill for a stretch, then split into 3 directions, each fork showing a different reflection in its waters, one of Konoha, one of the moon's spires glade, one of a bustling, unknown city of spires. A tree they passed under had leaves that rustled with whispered fragments of conversations in languages either recognized. This is a borderland. Elara realized, awe in her voice. A place that exists in the seams of stories, not within them. No one realm claims it. It is all potential, little actuality. So we're nowhere? Naruto asked, poking a floating, soap bubble-like orb that contained a tiny, perfect snowstorm. We are in the end, she said, a strange wonder lifting her words. The space between once upon a time and happily ever after. The place where choices are still being made. The discovery was freeing and terrifying. They were safe from immediate pursuit. But they were also unmoored from any narrative that could guide or shelter them. They had to write their own rules, moment to moment. As twilight, the permanent, gentle twilight deepened, the temperature dropped. A chill, not born of cold but of profound isolation, seeped into the air. Naruto, using a basic fire-release jutsu, which caused the nearby flowers to lean in curiously, as if listening, built a small campfire. The flames here burned in shades of blue and green, responding to the ambient magic. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, the dancing colors painting their faces. The silence stretched, but it was no longer just the silence of strangers. It was the silence of shared exhaustion, of mental and magical overload. Micro cliffhanger, Elara hugged her knees to her chest, staring into the alien flames. What is your home like? She asked quietly, the question a vulnerable breach in the wall between their worlds. Naruto poked the fire with a stick. Loud. Messy. Full of people who argue and laugh too much. There's a mountain with my face on it. He said it casually, but the pang of homesickness was a physical ache. Your face, on a mountain? She blinked, trying to process the scale, the audacity. Long story. I'm the leader there. The Hokage. It means I'm responsible for all of them. Their dreams, their safety. He looked up, meeting her eyes through the fire. I've got a wife. A son. A daughter. They must be going out of their minds. The confession hung in the air. He had given her a piece of his heart, raw and unvarnished. His emotional desire wasn't just to go home, It was to ease the worry he was causing. Elara's expression softened with the pain of understanding. They love you, she stated simply. Yeah. He swallowed. They do. What about you? The court, were they your family? She was silent for a long time. Family is a word that implies connection. Blood relation is just biology. They were my context. My purpose, given, not chosen. I had a function. A beautiful, lonely function. She drew a pattern in the purple grass. There was no one who would look for me. Not like your family looks for you. It was the loneliest thing Naruto had ever heard. It mirrored his own childhood so acutely it stole his breath. He recognized the shape of that emptiness. Risky choice. Without thinking, acting on an impulse deeper than strategy, he got up, walked around the fire, and sat down beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, distinct from the fire's heat. Well, he said, his voice rough. Now you've got a co-conspirator who's really bad at following the rules. And who's gonna find a way back, for both of us. She didn't pull away. She turned her head to look at him, her green eyes reflecting the blue-green flames. The barrier of their different worlds was still there, but in the shared silence of this between place, it felt thinner. They were two castaways, and their shared raft was the fragile trust they were building. You believe that? She murmured. It wasn't a question. I have to, he said. It's what I do. As the night, or the meadow's version of it, deepened, they took turns keeping watch. When it was Naruto's turn, he sat listening to the hum of the realm and Elara's slow, even breathing as she slept, curled near the fire. He watched the crystalline trees in the distance shimmer, and for the first time since falling into the fairy tale realm, the crushing loneliness receded, just a fraction. He wasn't alone in this anymore. Just before the soft dawn light began to seep back into the sky, Elara stirred. She sat up, her gaze going instantly to the horizon. Her breath caught. Naruto, she whispered, pointing. He followed her gaze. On the edge of the meadow, where the purple grass met the crystal forest, something was growing. It hadn't been there when they'd slept. A single, vast vine, thick as his thigh, had erupted from the ground. It spiraled upward, bearing enormous, closed buds that glowed with an internal light. One bud pulsed with golden light, the other with a soft, silvery green. As they watched, the golden bud trembled. With a sound like a sigh, it began to unfurl. Chapter 4. The Mirror and the Blade. The dark bloom hung like a dead star on the colossal vine. The hopeful warmth from moments before was gone, replaced by a cloying dread that clung to the back of Naruto's throat. He could still see it, and not as searching eyes, Shikamaru's weary slump, framed by the imagined bars of a prison not yet built. This realm didn't just reflect, it warped. It took desire and showed you the cost. Elara hadn't let go of his hand. Her fingers were cold. She was staring at the second, silvery green bud as if it were a venomous snake about to strike. Don't look, Naruto said, his voice rough. He tried to step in front of her, to block her view. This was his nightmare. He didn't want hers mirrored back at her. She resisted his gentle pull, her gaze fixed. It is mine, she whispered, a strange resignation in her tone. I must see. A warning unheeded is a fate accepted. As if on cue, the second bud quivered. Its unfurling was slower, more agonizing than the first. The petals peeled back with a sound like tearing silk, revealing not a pool of light, but a swirling mist of memory and magic. The image was not of a place, but of a state. It showed the moon's spire, but not as the cold, perfect palace. It was shown as a cradle, a beloved home. Elara saw herself as a child, her small hand held by a woman with Celine's starlight hair but a face softened by a smile that was now extinct. She was being taught the weave, her tiny fingers guiding threads of moonlight to mend a wilting night bloom. The love in that memory was a physical ache, so potent it made present-day Elara gasp. Then the image shifted. She was older, standing in her hidden garden, the one before Naruto. She was singing a lonely, beautiful song to a sprout, and it grew into a luminescent tree in seconds. Pride shone on her face, pure and uncomplicated. This was her purpose, her joy. Emotional desire, the vision was showing her the core of it, a deep, primal desire for belonging within her purpose. To be the cherished daughter, the perfect keeper, to have her magic be a loved and integral part of a beautiful, eternal whole. Then the crack appeared. Not a crack of darkness, but a hairline fracture of gold. It shot through the memory of her garden. Where it touched, the image changed. The peaceful garden grew violent, vibrant, overgrown. The gentle tree burst with fiery red leaves. The loving face of her mentor morphed into Celine's cold, disappointed mask. The belonging curdled into isolation. The purpose twisted into a prison sentence. The final image was of her, as she was now, standing in the court. But she was alone, and she was not Elara. She was a statue of polished moonstone, beautiful, eternal, and utterly empty. A perfect keeper, frozen in the act of weaving, her eyes vacant pools of gray. The ultimate acceptance of the quartz story. The erasure of her green, growing magic and the fiery spark of defiance that Naruto had ignited. The silvery bloom dimmed. The message was just as clear, just as cruel. Her deepest desire, to belong, to be valued for her magic, could only be fulfilled if she allowed herself to be unmade. To become a hollow monument to tradition. Barrier, the visions erected a new, silent wall between them. They were no longer just co-conspirators against an external threat. They were now bearers of mutually exclusive nightmares. His fear was external captivity, separation from his bonds. Her fear was internal annihilation, the loss of her very self. How could they protect each other from fates that were inverses of each other? Elara finally turned away from the dead bloom, her face pale. She looked at Naruto, and for a second, he saw the statue from the vision in her eyes, that terrifying emptiness. Then she blinked, and the fierce, green life rushed back in, along with a simmering anger. Propaganda. She spat, the word harsh and unfamiliar in her melodic voice. This place, it doesn't just show possibilities. It tries to shape them. It wants us afraid. It wants us to believe our choices only lead to ruin. Naruto felt a surge of relief so strong it made him lightheaded. She was fighting it. She wasn't accepting the vision as fate. It's a bully, he agreed, his own resolve hardening. Trying to scare us into doing what it wants. Well, I've never been good at listening to bullies. He let go of her hand and marched toward the massive vine. Before she could protest, he formed a Rasengan in his palm. The spiraling sphere of chakra, a technique born of his stubborn will, hummed and whirred, distorting the soft light of the between. He didn't hurl it at the vision vine. Instead, he pressed it gently against the thick stem. Risky choice, he didn't seek to destroy it. He poured his intent into the Rasengan. Reject. Defy. Show us something real. The vine reacted violently. It shuddered, and the two dead blooms shriveled to ash. But from the point of contact, where his sunbright chakra met the realm's neutral, mimetic magic, something new erupted. Not a flower, but a shoot of pure, blinding white. It grew with impossible speed, branching, leafing, and in seconds it bore a single, simple fruit, an apple that glowed with a warm, internal gold. It was not a vision. It felt present. Tangible. The entire meadow seemed to hold its breath. The hum in the air changed pitch, becoming more focused, more curious. Naruto dispelled the Rasengan and plucked the apple. It was warm and firm in his hand, radiating a comforting, familiar energy. It smelled like Konoha in the autumn, like Ichiraku's broth, like home. What did you do? Elara breathed, approaching cautiously. I talked back, he said, a grin tugging at his lips. He offered her the apple. Here. It feels clean. She took it, her fingers brushing his. She held it up, examining it. It is a confluence. Your will, my world substance, this realm's potential, made manifest. She looked at him, wonder overriding the fear. You didn't just ask it to change. You forced it to change by offering it a new pattern. A better one. Before they could decide what to do with the fruit, the consequence of his defiance arrived. The mirroring of the realm turned from psychological to physical. From the crystal forest, reflections emerged. Not copies, but inversions. A figure shaped like Naruto, but wrought from shifting shadow and jagged, broken light, stepped into the meadow. Its eyes were voids. Opposite it, a figure of Elara formed from rigid, clear crystal, its movements stiff, its face a smooth, expressionless plane. The shadow Naruto moved with his aggressive speed, but its attacks were meant to entrap, to bind, shadowy tendrils that sought to coil around limbs and seal away chakra. The crystal Elara moved with her graceful magic, but it was magic turned to control. Jagged spikes of crystal erupted from the ground, not to kill, but to cage, to create an impassable, beautiful prison. They were being attacked by the physical embodiments of their prophesied fears. They're trying to make the visions come true, Naruto yelled, ducking a shadow lash and shattering a crystal spike with a chakra-enhanced kick. Elara's face set into lines of cold fury. She threw the golden apple to the ground, where it rolled into the purple grass. Then we show them their error. She didn't use the gentle, persuasive magic of the moon's spire. She used the magic of her secret garden, the magic Naruto's presence had awakened. She slammed her palms onto the ground. The purple grass erupted into thick, thorny brambles that wrapped around the crystal Elara's legs, not to hold it still, but to crush. The brambles glowed with verdant green life force, aggressive and possessive. Naruto saw her strategy. Fight control with suppression? No. Fight control with connection. He formed a shadow clone. But instead of sending it to attack, he had it run towards the shadow Naruto. As the shadowy tendrils shot to envelop it, the clone didn't dodge. It grabbed them. And the moment contact was made, Naruto focused. Micro cliffhanger, he didn't pull chakra back. He pushed a specific, concentrated thread of it down the connection the shadow had created, a thread carrying not destructive power, but pure, overwhelming emotion. The loneliness of his childhood, the joy of his first friends, the determination of his vows, the profound love for his family. A tsunami of messy, human feeling. The shadow Naruto recoiled as if scorched. Its form writhed, the voids of its eyes flickering with chaotic, borrowed light. It couldn't process the data. It was designed to counter force with restraint, but it had no defense against a heart laid bare. Seeing his success, Naruto shouted to Elara. "Don't fight its magic! Overload it with you!" She understood. As the crystal Elara tried to freeze her brambles into pretty, inert sculptures, Elara poured not more power, but her truth into her magic. The memory of her hidden garden solitude, the thrill of her first successful, unauthorized bloom, the searing pain of the court's disappointment, the terrifying, exhilarating warmth of Naruto's chakra brushing her own. She flooded the crystalline structure with the complexity of a soul, not the simplicity of a duty. The crystal Elara stopped moving. A web of fractures appeared on its smooth surface. From within the cracks, not light, but the deep, vibrant green of life and the stubborn gold of an alien sun began to seep. The two inversions shuddered. Then, simultaneously, they didn't explode, but dissolved. The shadow melted into the purple grass, which grew darker, richer where it sank. The crystal shattered into dust that settled on the meadow, causing a circle of glowing, multicolored mushrooms to instantly sprout. They stood panting in the sudden quiet. The meadow was different. Where they had fought, the flora was now more vibrant, more varied, slightly wild. Their defiance had not just defeated the attack, it had left a permanent mark on the between. Elara walked to where the golden apple lay. She picked it up, cradling it. "We rewrote the page," she said, her voice full of awe. Naruto came to stand beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. "Looks like it." He looked at the apple. "What do we do with that?" "We eat it," she said decisively. "Are you sure? It could be anything." "It is us," she stated, as if it were obvious. "Our defiance given form. Our will-made sustenance. To refuse it would be to refuse our own choice." She met his eyes, a challenge in her green gaze. "Unless you are afraid, Hokage?" He snorted. "TCH. You first, princess." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. She brought the apple to her mouth and took a crisp, decisive bite. Her eyes flew wide. Not in pain, but in shock. A soft, golden glow emanated from her skin for a second. "It tastes of sunlight on leaves," she whispered. "And ramen?" Naruto laughed, a real, full-bodied sound that echoed strangely in the humming air. He took the apple from her and bit into it. The flavor was incredible, a burst of home and hearth, layered with the taste of cold starlight and deep, rich earth. Energy, clean and potent, flooded his system, healing the last of his fatigue and the subtle tears in his chakra coils from the vortex. Consequence, as the last of the apple vanished, they felt the change. The between was no longer just a neutral, watchful space reflecting their fears. It had responded to them. It had been challenged, and in doing so, it had accepted a piece of their combined signature. The realm now knew them not as passive refugees, but as active agents. They had drawn a line. They had also drawn attention. In the distance, the crystal forest seemed to shift, reorienting subtly towards them. The mountains of glass refracted the light into new, unfamiliar patterns. The between was adjusting its narrative to include two stubborn, bonded interlopers. As they gathered themselves to move camp away from the site of the battle, Naruto felt a new connection, a faint, but steady, thread in his consciousness. It wasn't a clone. It was a sense of Elara's emotional state. A calm determination, underpinned by a lingering wonder. He looked at her. She was staring at her hands, a faint frown on her face. "Do you feel that?" he asked quietly. She looked up, nodding slowly. "A resonance. In the silence of my own magic, I can hear a distant, warm echo. Like a drumbeat from another world." She clasped her hands together. "The bond we forged to escape, it didn't break. It settled. It is rooted now. In us. And in this place." Chapter 5: The Architecture of Longing. The shared dream homesickness hung in the air like a third presence. Elara quickly wiped her cheeks, a gesture of pride that seemed both profoundly royal and heartbreakingly young. Naruto didn't comment on the tears. He just sat up, the blanket of soft moss they'd gathered falling away. "You felt that?" he said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the pulsating mushrooms. "It was a wave. A deep, hollow pull. I've never felt anything like it. My longing has always been quiet. A missing piece. Yours is an anchor chain, taut and straining. She finally looked at him. It must be agonizing. He shrugged, the familiar gesture feeling inadequate. It's the price of having something to lose. He paused, studying her in the ethereal light. And yours? The quiet missing piece? She drew a slow breath. Imagine a song you've heard all your life. It's beautiful. Perfect. But you've always hummed a counter melody under your breath, one that doesn't quite fit. The longing isn't for a different song. It's for the permission to sing your own aloud. She touched the soil beside her. This place, it has no song. It's all counter melody. It's freeing, and it's utterly desolate. Emotional desire, in the confessional darkness, their desires crystallized. He desired the specific, the weight of his son on his shoulders, the smell of his daughter's hair, the particular clatter of the Hokage office at noon. She desired the possible, the right to define her own beauty, her own growth, without the rigid template of the court's eternal starlight. We need a plan, Naruto said, shifting into the practical mindset that had saved him 100 times over. This between place reacts to us. We can't just wander and hope for a door. We have to build one. Elara's green eyes sharpened with interest. Build? With what? With this. He held up a hand, a tiny globe of chakra, sun-gold, steady, swirling above his palm. And that? He nodded to her. Your magic talks to the world. My chakra is my will made real. Together, we made an apple that didn't just feed us, it changed us. We marked this place. She considered this, her mind visibly working through the paradigm. You propose we don't search for an existing exit. We impose our own geometry on the between. Create a structure of intent strong enough to puncture through to somewhere, chosen. Yeah. A targeted Rasengan on reality. A faint, real smile touched her lips. A very you solution. Barrier. The barrier was scale and specificity. To alter a small patch of meadow was one thing. To forge a bridge between worlds required a focus, a blueprint. They lacked a map, a sextant, a true north. His chakra could provide the power, her magic the interface, but they needed a design. A shared vision precise enough to guide the chaotic potential of the between. Dawn, the gentle lightning of the perpetual twilight, found them exploring with new purpose. They moved away from the now familiar meadow, towards the forest of crystalline trees. As they walked, they experimented. Naruto would focus on a single, concrete memory, the stone face of the Hokage monument. He'd pour that image, infused with the feeling of responsibility and belonging it evoked, into a controlled stream of chakra. Elara would then take that stream and knit it into the air, using her magic like a loom. The result was ephemeral, a shimmering, three-dimensional ghost of the monument's brow or eye, hanging in the air for a few seconds before the between's neutral hum absorbed it. It was like trying to build a castle out of mist. Frustration mounted. The issue, Elara realized, was duality. We are two artists trying to paint the same canvas at once, she said, after Naruto's memory of Ichiraku's ramen stall dissolved into a confusing aroma of broth and damp earth. Our impressions are similar, but not identical. The between seizes on the discrepancy, and the image collapses. Risky choice. Naruto stopped walking. He looked at her, a determined glint in his blue eyes. Then we don't be two artists. We have to be one. He sat down cross-legged on the crystalline forest floor, which chimed softly beneath him. Sit. Face me. Wary but intrigued, Elara complied, mirroring his posture. Their knees almost touched. You remember the vortex? How we could feel each other's stuff? He asked. Vividly. We need to do that again. But not in a panic. On purpose. We need to mix the paints before we try to paint. Her heart thumped against her ribs. The vortex had been a terrifying, exhilarating intimacy. To invite that willingly was to surrender a fundamental boundary. The risk, if our essences clash instead of blend, it could unmake us from the inside. Or create another chaotic tear. Or, he said, holding her gaze, it could be the foundation. You trusted me enough to drop the chain. Trust me with this. She searched his face, the whiskered scars, the earnest eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw. She saw no deception, only a fierce, pragmatic hope. He was offering not just a technique, but a profound vulnerability. He was asking her to meet him in a place with no walls. Consequence, she placed her hands, palms up, on her knees. An invitation. He placed his hands over hers, palm to palm. Skin to skin? No magic, no chakra yet. Just the contact. Her hands were cool, long-fingered, elegant. His were warm, calloused, strong. A contrast that was becoming familiar. Okay. He breathed, closing his eyes. Don't fight it. Just listen. He began, not with a surge, but with a slow, gentle exhalation of his chakra. Not the blazing sun of battle, but the steady, life-giving light of dawn. He pushed it down his arms, into his palms, and let it seep into her skin. Elara gasped. It was so much more controlled than before. She felt it enter her magical pathways, which were structured like the root systems of ancient trees. His energy was a river of warm honey, flowing through the roots, seeking, exploring. It didn't destroy. It illuminated. Following his lead, she opened her own channels. She allowed her magic to rise, not the cold silver of the court, but the deep, verdant green of growth and the soft gray of hidden moonstones. It flowed up her arms and into his hands. In the space where their palms met, the energies met. There was a moment of profound dissonance, a screech of wrongness on a cellular level. Then, something shifted. Not a blend, but a braid. The gold and the green, the solar and the lunar, the willful and the receptive, began to spiral around each other. They didn't become one color. They became a double helix of distinct but perfectly complementary forces. Naruto saw it in his mind's eye, a sapling wrapped in sunlight, growing not just upward, but inward, its roots tapping into a deep, warm core. Elara felt it, a sun not scorching, but nestled in the heart of a forest, its light filtered through leaves into a dappled, perfect warmth. Micro cliffhanger, they opened their eyes at the same time. The world had changed. They still saw the crystal forest, but they saw it in layers. Naruto could see the magical currents Elara always perceived, river-like flows of potential energy in the air, the health glow of the trees. Elara could see the physical world with shocking, shinobi-like clarity, the minute fractures in distant crystals, the almost imperceptible shift in air pressure, the solid, anchoring realness of things. And they saw each other. Not just faces, but auras. A brilliant, chaotic gold-haloed Naruto, shot through with threads of stubborn orange and calming blue, the lingering echoes of Kurama and his parents. Around Elara was a complex nebula of deep green and silvery white, with a core of something new, a spark of captured sunlight that pulsed in time with Naruto's heartbeat. The bond was no longer just emotional. It was structural. They had built a shared sensory and energetic framework. Wow! Naruto breathed. Indeed, Elara whispered, her voice full of awe. The experiment had worked. But the consequence was immediate and profound. They were now psychically conjoined at a shallow but permanent level. The barrier of separate perceptions was gone. They could feel the echo of each other's surface thoughts, the hum of each other's energy. It was intimacy of a staggering degree. They spent the next hours testing the limits. They could, with focus, project a shared image, a door, an archway, that held its form far longer, woven from their braided energy. They could sense disturbances in the between from miles away, a combined early warning system. But they also had to learn to shield, to create private mental spaces, or risk being overwhelmed by the constant, low-level buzz of the other's presence. As the day waned, they found a clearing dominated by a single, massive geode cracked open like an egg. Its interior was lined with deep amethyst crystals that throbbed with a gentle light. It felt like a natural temple. Here, Elara said, her voice resonant in the shared sight. The energy here is a focusing lens. If we are to build our door, this is the place to lay the cornerstone. They stood in the center of the geode, surrounded by the ancient, patient crystals. We need a unified target, Naruto said. We can't just say home. My home isn't yours. Elara nodded. It must be a place of convergence. A nexus. Somewhere a story of sun and a story of moon could theoretically meet. An idea formed, not in one mind, but in the shared space between them. It was a hybrid vision, born of their braided consciousness. A crossroads. Not a physical one, but a metaphysical one. A place where the narrative of a shinobi's hard-won peace intersected with the narrative of a fairy tale's stifled magic. A place of choice, not destiny. Together, without speaking, they began. Naruto poured in the concept, the Valley of the End, where his story had pivoted so dramatically. But not the battlefield. The quiet river afterwards. A place of reflection and new beginnings. Elara wove in her essence, not the moon's spire, but the moment in the hidden garden just before the vortex, when she had chosen the unknown. The fertile, charged potential of a decision about to be made. Their braided energy, sun and root, they'd begun to call it unconsciously, flowed from their joined hands into the air of the geode. The amethyst crystals brightened, amplifying, focusing. In the center of the clearing, the air began to weave itself. It was slow. Agonizingly slow. They weren't tearing a hole. They were convincing reality to grow a new organ. An archway of intertwined light and substance began to form. The frame was of petrified wood shot through with gold veins. The space within it swirled not with a destination, but with a quality, passage. Sweat beaded on Naruto's brow. Elara trembled with the strain. The architecture of longing was excruciating to build. It demanded every ounce of their focus, their shared will, their hard-earned trust. The archway stabilized, its edges becoming crisp. The swirling within settled into a opaque, shimmering silver green, like the surface of a pond seen from below. It was done. A door. Their door. They dropped their hands, the connection severing with a soft, mental snap. The shared sight faded, leaving them feeling oddly muted, alone in their own skulls again. They stood panting, staring at their creation. Risky choice. We don't know where it goes, Elara said, her voice hoarse. It goes forward, Naruto replied, conviction firm. That's enough. He took a step toward the arch. Then he stopped and looked back at her, offering his hand once more. Not for energy. For companionship. She looked from the arch to his hand. This was the final barrier. To step through was to leave the between, the only place where their strange bond had been forged. It was to enter a new story, together, with no guarantee of the genre. It was the ultimate leap of faith. Chapter 6: The Tangled Weald and the Huntsman's Eye. The woods were ancient. Older, Naruto sensed immediately, than even the forests of the between. These trees had witnessed real time, real seasons, and the weight of it pressed down on them, a silence deeper than the between's hum. The air was cold enough to fog their breath. This world had a bite to it. The hunting horn sounded again, closer now. A different, sharper note answered it from the direction of the clashing steel. Orders. Coordination. We're in a battlefield, Naruto whispered, his senses stretching. His chakra, no longer masked, felt heavy but responsive here, as if this world's magic had a gravity to it. He could feel multiple signatures moving, some flickering with sharp, metallic intent, the hunters, others blazing with desperate, chaotic energy, the hunted. Two groups. The ones with horns are methodical. The others, they're panicking. Elara was already moving, her gown whispering against the ferns. She pressed a hand to the gnarled trunk of an oak. Her eyes closed. The forest is afraid, she murmured. Its song is full of thorns and fire. The hunters, they wear the forest's silence like a cloak. The hunted, they burn too brightly. She opened her eyes, her green gaze urgent. We are in the path of the drive. They are herding the bright ones towards us. Barrier. They were caught between two unknown forces. To intervene was to declare for a side instantly in a conflict they didn't understand. To hide was nearly impossible. Their combined energy signature, though subdued, was likely a bonfire in the sensory landscape of whatever magic worked here. Risky choice. We can't stay here, Naruto said, his Hokage calculus overriding caution. If they're being herded, this clearing will be a killing zone. We move towards the bright ones. Maybe we can slip through their lines, or at least see what we're dealing with. Elara nodded, trusting his tactical instinct. They moved off the path, melting into the undergrowth with a silence born of his shinobi training and her innate harmony with growing things. The forest floor was a tangle of roots and fallen leaves, but she seemed to know where to step to avoid a sound. They crested a small rise and looked down into a shallow gully. The bright ones were Fae. But not like the court of the unseen moon. These were creatures of vibrant, wild magic. A man with bark-like skin and hair of twigs was trying to shield a woman whose wings were torn petals, fluttering uselessly. A child glowed with inner light, huddled behind a rock. There were a dozen of them, their magic a discordant symphony of fear, sparks of light, spurts of uncontrolled growth, whispered songs that cracked in the air. They were exhausted, cornered. Surrounding the gully, moving with terrifying silence, were the hunters. They wore uniforms of deep gray and forest green, their faces obscured by hoods and featureless, polished wooden masks. They carried no visible weapons, but the air around them was dead, void of magic. They were walking null spaces. One of the Fae, a youth with antlers, made a desperate break for the tree line. A hunter simply raised a hand. The air in front of the youth thickened, solidified into a transparent, gel-like wall. He slammed into it and fell back, dazed. Dampeners? Elara breathed, horror in her voice. They don't just hunt. They cage magic. They are the antithesis of everything. Naruto's blood ran cold. He'd seen something like this before, the scientific ninja tools, the attempt to standardize and control chakra. But this was more profound. This was a systemic hatred of the magical itself. Emotional desire. In that moment, their desires aligned with shocking, violent clarity. He saw the terrified Fae child and saw Boruto, saw Himawari. The protector in him roared to life. She saw the suppression of wild, beautiful magic and saw the fate the court had planned for her, a neat, orderly extinction. The rebel in her found its cause. They didn't need to speak. A plan formed in the glance they shared. Naruto formed a half-ram seal. Shadow clone jutsu. 4 clones poofed into existence. Not 100. Stealth and precision were key. Elara knelt, pressing her palms into the earth. She didn't sing to the forest, she grieved with it. She showed it an image of the hunter's silence, a cancer in its vibrant body. The forest, ancient and proud, responded. Micro cliffhanger. As two hunters closed in on the petal-winged woman, the roots beneath their feet, which had been still for centuries, erupted. They coiled around ankles, yanking the hunters off their feet with a muffled crunch. The eerie silence of their approach shattered. At the same moment, Naruto's clones dropped from the trees above the other flank. They didn't use Raisengans or fancy techniques. They used taijutsu, swift, brutal, efficient strikes to pressure points, designed to incapacitate, not kill. The hunters were trained, but they fought a predictable, formation-based style. They weren't prepared for the chaotic, close-quarters whirlwind of a shinobi. Chaos erupted in the gully. The Fae, seeing their captors under attack, rallied. The bark-skinned man roared, and thorns erupted from the ground around a third hunter. The child's glow intensified, pushing back the nullfield that had been creeping towards them. Naruto's original body and Elara moved as one. He sprinted towards the center of the gully, a living shield between the hunters and the most vulnerable Fae. Elara followed in his wake, her hands weaving. When Naruto's chakra had touched the ground in his passage, her magic catalyzed. Vines, thick and studded with toxic-looking blooms, surged up to form a living, writhing barrier between the hunters and their prey. One hunter, taller than the rest, stood apart. He observed the chaos, his wooden mask turning slowly. His gaze passed over the battling clones, the raging Fae, and settled on Naruto and Elara. He didn't move to attack. He simply raised a hand, fingers splayed. A wave of absolute nullification washed out from him. It hit Naruto first. His chakra flickered, guttered. It felt like being plunged into ice water, his very life force suppressed. Behind him, two of his clones poofed away, unable to maintain form. Elara cried out as her connection to the forest was severed, the vines she'd summoned wilting instantly into brittle husks. The Fae's magic sputtered and died. The head huntsman lowered his hand. The silence returned, heavier than before. He began to walk forward, his boots making no sound on the leaves. Consequence: their intervention had failed. Worse, it had identified them as high-value targets. They were now not just bystanders, but priority captures. The bark-skinned Fae man stumbled to Naruto's side, his thorny magic reduced to a faint prickle on his skin. "Flee!" he rasped, his voice like grating stone. "He is the grieving lord's right hand. He carries the quiet. You cannot fight it." "The grieving lord?" Elara asked, helping the petal-winged woman to her feet. "A mortal king who lost his heart to a Fae enchantment," the Fae woman whispered, her torn wings trembling. "Now he hates all magic. He sends his huntsmen to scour the tangled weald and bring us to his museum." The word was uttered with pure dread. The head huntsman was 20 paces away. He drew no weapon. The void around him was weapon enough. Naruto's mind raced. Direct chakra attacks were useless. Taijutsu would mean entering his null field, where his own strength would fail. They were out of tricks. "No," he thought. "We have one." He looked at Elara. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. She understood. The braid. Their sun and root energy was not purely magical, nor purely chakra-based. It was a new thing. Would the quiet recognize it? Could it suppress a resonance it had never encountered? It was a terrible gamble. Risky choice. As the head huntsman raised his hand again, Naruto grabbed Elara's hand. Not gently. Desperately. "Now!" he hissed. They didn't try to attack. They did the opposite. They turned inward. They focused on the braid they had forged in the geode, that lived now just beneath their skins. They stoked it, not as a weapon, but as a beacon. A declaration of existence. Gold and green light erupted from their clasped hands, not in a blast, but in a radiant pulse. It was a complex, living light, full of the warmth of ramen and the cool of moonstones, of stubborn will and patient growth. The wave of quiet hit it. And shattered. The null field didn't absorb it, it recoiled from it, like oil from water. The head huntsman stumbled, a faint, almost inaudible gasp escaping his mask. The polished wood cracked, a hairline fracture running from the temple to the chin. He clutched his head, the absolute silence around him breaking into a discordant, painful ringing only he could hear. Their energy was too alien, too fundamentally bonded to be categorized as mere magic. It confused the suppressing frequency. "Run!" Naruto yelled to the Fae. They didn't need telling. The temporary rupture in the quiet had restored a flicker of their power. The bark-skinned man scooped up the glowing child. The group bolted into the forest, moving with renewed, desperate speed. Naruto and Elara ran with them, hand in hand, their joined light fading but the connection thrumming with triumph and terror. They had won a moment, not a battle. They ran until their lungs burned, following the Fae through paths only they could see. Finally, deep in a hollow where a waterfall spilled into a black pool, they collapsed. The Fae were tending to their wounded, their voices hushed and fearful. The bark-skinned man approached. He bowed deeply, a gesture that sent a shower of dried leaves from his shoulders. I am Oak. You have the thanks of the free wield. But you have also drawn the grieving lord's eye. He will not rest until you are in his collection. Collection? Elara asked, dreading the answer. A palace of stillness, Oak said, his voice grim, where the magical are placed in beautiful, silent cages, frozen in their moment of capture. He calls it preservation. It is a living death. Naruto felt a cold fury. It was the Moon Spire's philosophy taken to a violent, mortal extreme. Micro cliffhanger. We need to get out of this forest, Naruto said. Find a place to regroup. Oak shook his head. The Weald is vast, and the huntsmen are many. Your only hope is the wandering market. It appears at the new moon at the crossroads of whispers. Traders from all realms gather there. Even the grieving lord cannot breach its accords. You might find passage, or answers there. When is the new moon? Elara asked. Oak looked up through the canopy at the sliver of crescent in the sky. 3 nights. 3 nights of being hunted in an endless, hostile wood. As they absorbed this, the petal-winged woman, she called herself Lily, flew unsteadily to Elara. In her hands she held 2 small, drab-brown seed pods. For you, she whispered. Cling moss pods. They will mask your unique song. You will smell of damp wood and stone to the huntsman's senses. It is not perfect, but it will help. They took the pods, crushing them in their hands. A musty, earthy scent enveloped them, and they felt a faint, fuzzy dampening settle over their braided energy signature. Chapter 7: The Crossroads of Whispers. The next 3 days were a lesson in a new kind of exhaustion. It wasn't the bone-deep fatigue of chakra depletion or the mental strain of high-stakes diplomacy. It was the grinding, constant tension of being prey. The tangled Weald lived up to its name, a labyrinth of gnarled roots, deceptive clearings, and sudden, treacherous bogs. Every shadow held the potential for a featureless wooden mask. Every rustle of leaves could be the sigh of the approaching quiet. The cling moss pods worked, but they were a blunt instrument. They wrapped Naruto's solar chakra and Elara's lunar magic in a uniform, drab blanket, making them smell of loam and decay to magical senses. But it also muted their own perceptions. Naruto felt half-deaf, his chakra sensing dulled. Elara's connection to the living forest became a distant murmur. They were navigating blind in a world of sharp teeth. They traveled by night, guided by Oak and Lily, who moved through the Weald with an instinctual grace. During the day, they hid in hollow trees or underground burrows Oak's magic could coax from the roots. The silence in these hideaways was thick, punctuated only by their own breaths and the distant, haunting calls of the huntsman's horns. It was in these cramped, dark spaces that the bond proved its worth beyond battle. Words were dangerous. A whisper could carry. So they learned to communicate in glances, in the subtle pressure of a hand, in the shared emotional landscape they now inhabited. A spike of Naruto's impatience would be met by a calming wave from Elara, not magic, but the emotional resonance of her presence. Her moments of claustrophobic dread, a legacy of the spire's vast, empty halls, would be soothed by the steady, stubborn warmth of his spirit beside her. Emotional desire, their desire had simplified, hardened into a single point, sanctuary. Not just a hiding place, but a moment to breathe, to think, to understand the rules of this brutal new game. The wandering market represented not just escape, but information, a chance to map the narrative they'd been thrust into. On the second night, as they waded through a chest-deep, icy stream to mask their scent, disaster nearly struck. Lily, weakened by her torn wings, lost her footing on the slick stones. The current snatched her with surprising force. A cry was torn from her lips, a short, sharp sound that was pure, undamped magic. Upstream, a hunting horn immediately answered, shockingly close. Go! Oak hissed, shoving Naruto and Elara towards the far bank. We will lead them away! No! Elara protested, but Naruto was already moving, grabbing her arm. He'd made too many of these calculations. The sacrifice of a few to save the mission. It tasted like ash, but he knew its brutal logic. We have to, he murmured, his voice a pained rasp. He pulled her, stumbling, up the bank and into the thick bracken. They crouched, hearts hammering, as they heard the splashing pursued, the shouted commands in a guttural tongue, and then, a sound like a sighing wind. The quiet. It passed over the stream, and the magical signatures of Oak and Lily, the vibrant green of Oak, the fragile blush of Lily, snuffed out like candles. Not dead. Captured. Silenced. Elara trembled beside him, a silent tremor of rage and grief. Naruto felt it through the bond, a cold fire that matched his own self-loathing. They had run. Again. Barrier, the guilt erected a temporary wall between them. He was the tactician, the Hokage who made hard choices. She was the nurturer, the keeper who protected life. In that moment, their roles felt irreconcilable. The silence that followed was no longer comfortable. It was accusing. They found the crossroads of whispers on the dawn of the third day, just as the last sliver of the old moon vanished from the sky. It wasn't a physical intersection of paths. It was a feeling. The air grew thin and tasted of ozone. The ancient trees drew back, forming a perfect, silent circle of hard-packed gray earth. In the center stood a single, skeletal thorn tree, its branches clawing at the brightening sky. It was a place outside the wield's jurisdiction, a pocket of neutral ground. As the first true rays of sunlight pierced the canopy, the market bloomed. It didn't arrive, it manifested. Stalls woven from living willow and luminous fungus pushed up from the earth. Canopies of iridescent spider silk unfurled. Lanterns containing captive will-o'-the-wisps flickered to life. The air filled with a low, bustling hum, the chatter of 100 languages, the clink of strange coins, the smell of exotic spices, roasting meats, and potent, magical herbs. The clientele was a dizzying tapestry of realms. Naruto saw dwarves with beards braided with gems arguing with slender, blue-skinned beings from a water world. A woman covered in iridescent scales haggled over a jar of glowing moths. A cloaked figure whose face was a swirling nebula examined a crystal that wept black tears. And everywhere, furtive, wild-eyed fae like Oak and Lily, but from other clans, other woods, moving with a constant, wary tension. Risky choice. The Kling Moss disguise was a liability here. They needed to pass as legitimate traders or patrons, not frightened refugees. At the edge of the circle, they scrubbed the last of the pods from their skin with handfuls of dew-damp moss. Their true signatures, the braided sun and root, seeped back out, but they kept it tightly leashed, a low hum rather than a beacon. They entered the market, doing their best to look purposeful. Naruto's eyes scanned for threats, exits, sources of information. Elara's senses reached out, tasting the magics on offer, listening to the fragments of conversation. The grieving lord's price for dream silk has tripled. Heard the thorn rose was sighted near the Obsidian Falls, passage to the sunken citadel? Not for less than a vial of your memories. They needed a guide. A broker of information. They found her at a stall that sold bottled sounds, a laugh in a crystal vial, a thunderstorm in a smoky flask. The vendor was an old woman with skin like wrinkled parchment, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. She had too many fingers on each hand, and they moved with a restless, knitting motion even when idle. A sign above her stall read, in shifting runes, Granny Knot, patterns and prices. She watched them approach, her sea-gray eyes missing nothing. Lost, she stated, her voice like pebbles rolling in a tide. Not just in the Weald. In the story. Your threads all tangled with another's. Unusual weave. Costly to unpick. We need to get out of this realm, Naruto said, keeping his voice low. And we need to know more about the grieving lord. And the thorn rose. Granny Knot's many fingers stilled. Jumping from the stew pot into the narrative fire, are we? The lord and the witch are two sides of a cursed coin. You can't know one without invoking the other. She leaned forward. The price for a path out is one thing. The price for that story is another. What do you offer? They had nothing. No strange coins, no bottled memories, no magical trinkets. Elara stepped forward. I offer a song. Not a bottled one. A live one. A verse that has never been sung outside a hidden garden. The old woman's eyes gleamed. A new pattern. Intriguing. But ephemeral. I need something with weight. Naruto's hand went to the one thing of value he carried that wasn't a part of him. The forehead protector of the Hokage, the leaf symbol etched deep into the metal. It was a symbol of his identity, his vows, his home. Letting it go felt like a physical wound. Consequence, he placed it on the counter. This. It carries the weight of a village. Of a world. Granny Knot picked it up, her many fingers tracing the spiral and the leaf. She closed her eyes, humming. Determination. Sacrifice. Loneliness at the top. And a surprising amount of ramen. She opened her eyes. It'll do. For the passage. And the story? Elara pressed. The old woman grinned, showing sharp, too many teeth. For the story, you must give me a secret. A true one. One you have never told another soul. The air grew still around their stall. This was a deeper magic, a transaction of essence. Naruto and Elara looked at each other. The bond thrummed between them, a private channel. What secret was truly theirs alone? Their lives were already an open book to each other in so many ways. Micro cliffhanger, Elara spoke first, her voice barely audible. My secret is, I am glad the court cast me out. The admission hung in the air. It wasn't just about defiance. It was a deep, shameful relief. The burden of perfection, of eternal, lonely duty, had been immense. Her exile was a tragedy, but also a liberation she had never dared admit, even to herself. Granny nodded, satisfied. She turned to Naruto. He took a breath. His deepest secret, it wasn't about the Nine Tails or his parents. Those were wounds known, if not fully understood. He thought of his family, and the truth that sometimes kept him awake in the Hokage office. My secret, he said, the words thick, is that sometimes, when I'm surrounded by my family in my own home, I still feel like that lonely kid on the monument. And I'm terrified they'll see it. It was the fear beneath the love. The scar that never fully healed. Granny Knot's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Good, she whispered. True weight. She pocketed the forehead protector with one set of fingers, while another set produced a small, dried, twisted root from beneath her shawl. Chew this. Both of you. It will guide your feet to the nearest stable rift that leads to a realm of flexible narratives. A place where a sun man and a moon woman might not be torn apart. She handed the root to Elara. Then, with her stormy eyes holding theirs, she began the story. The thorn rose which was not born wicked. She was the spirit of the Weald itself, given a heart and a form. She loved a mortal king with a passion that shook the stars. But mortal hearts are fragile things. They cannot bear the full, wild weight of a primal love. He grew afraid of her, of the magic that overgrew his tidy world. In his fear, he sought a charm from a different sort of court. Granny Knot's eyes flickered to Elara, a knowing glance. A charm to make his heart safe. To make it quiet. Elara's breath hitched. The court of the unseen moon. They had provided the means. The charm worked too well, Granny Knot continued. It didn't protect his heart. It removed it. Turned it to cold, hard diamond and locked it away. The king felt nothing. No love, no fear, no sorrow. At first. Then, the emptiness itself became a feeling, a vast, howling grief for the loss of feeling. He became the grieving lord. And his grief manifested as the quiet, a force to silence all magic, so he would never be hurt by its wildness again. And the witch? Naruto asked. Her heart remained. Broken, wild, and furious. Her love turned to a venomous thorns. She retreated into the deepest Weald, and her sorrow blights the land wherever she walks. They are locked in a dance, he, trying to eradicate the magic that wounded him, she, unleashing torrents of it in her pain, which only justifies his crusade. You cannot side with one without becoming the enemy of the other. You are in a war with no right side. The weight of the story settled on them. They weren't just avoiding a hunt. They were in a centuries-old fairy tale tragedy. The rift, Naruto said, his voice grim. Where does it lead? To the realm of echoing pages, Granny Knot said. A library dimension. A place of collected stories. If you seek to understand your own thread, or to find a way to truly leave this tale behind, that is where you must start. But be warned, in a library, you are as likely to be shelved as you are to find a book. She gestured for them to chew the root. It was bitter, chalky. As they swallowed, a faint, silver path appeared at their feet, visible only to them, leading out of the market and into the trees. As they turned to leave, Granny Knot called out one last time, her voice echoing with prophecy. A bond like yours is a new kind of magic. It could be a suture, or a sharper blade. Choose your ending wisely. Most stories only have one. Chapter 8. Stacks of the Unwritten. The choice was no choice at all. The Thornrose Witch's presence was a gale of sorrow and rage. The very air around her crystallized with thorns and wept fragrant, toxic sap. To face her now, untethered, emotionally raw, in the middle of a panicking market, was suicide. The library rift shimmered, a silent, sterile alternative to the fairy tale's violent heart. Go! Naruto barked, shoving Elara towards the vertical tear. She didn't resist. They leapt through together, hands locked, as the first grasping vines of heartbroken magic lashed at the space where they'd stood. The transition was a relief of a terrible kind. The riot of scents, sounds, and wild emotions of the Weald was severed, replaced by an immense, muffled silence. They landed on a floor of dark, polished wood that seemed to drink the light. The rift sealed behind them with a soft shhh, like a page turning. They were in an aisle. It stretched in both directions to impossible vanishing points. The shelves were obsidian black and reached up into a gloom pierced by distant, floating orbs of cool white light. They weren't bookshelves in any traditional sense. The books were prismatic crystals, scrolls of beaten gold, floating spheres of liquid light, carved stone tablets, and bundles of whispering reeds. The air was cool, dry, and carried the faint, clean scent of ozone and old paper. The silence was profound, but not empty. It was the silence of profound listening. Emotional desire, their immediate desire was for pause. For a single, uninterrupted moment to breathe, to process the onslaught of the last few days, the court, the between, the hunt, the tragic story of the grieving lord and the witch. This place, for all its eerie grandeur, offered that. It was neutral ground in a way the between had never been. Barrier. But a new barrier revealed itself instantly: direction. In the Weald, the goal was simple: survive, reach the market. Here, in this infinite, silent archive, purpose scattered. What were they looking for? A book on interdimensional travel? A history of the Court of the Unseen Moon? A guide to severing magical bonds? The scope was paralyzing. Elara, still trembling from the witch's near miss, leaned against the shelf. The moment her shoulder touched the dark wood, a section of it rippled. Glyphs in a silver, flowing script lit up along the edge. A nearby crystal book pulsed with a soft blue light. She jerked away as if burned. It's alive. Responsive. Naruto approached more cautiously. He focused on a thought: home. Konoha. He let the feeling, the longing, the specific image of the Hokage office at dusk, rise to the surface of his mind. The library responded. Several shelves down, a scroll of what looked like tanned, strange leather unraveled itself with a soft sigh. An image, hazy but recognizable, projected from it: the gates of Konoha, but stylized, simplified, as if drawn in ink and watercolor. It was Konoha as a story, not a place. It catalogs narratives, Elara whispered, understanding dawning. It doesn't store facts. It stores interpretations. The essence of stories from all realms. A new, chilling thought occurred to Naruto. If this place collected stories, where was theirs? Were they already a footnote in some crystalline, interdimensional intrusions, or failed fairy tale revolutions? Risky choice. We can't just wander, he said, voice low, respecting the library's hush. We need a guide. A librarian. In a place this vast, a librarian would be a god, Elara replied. But she placed her palm flat against the shelf again, this time with intention. She didn't think of a question. She thought of a quality: guidance. The reaction was subtle. The silver glyphs on the shelf glowed brighter, then faded. A single, small orb of light detached from a high shelf far above and drifted down like a dandelion seed. It hovered before them, pulsing gently. It had no face, no form. But a soft, genderless voice emanated from it, a sound like pages turning. Query. We seek understanding, Elara ventured, of our own situation, and a way to navigate between realms without causing harm. The orb pulsed. Cross-referencing, unauthorized narrative convergence. Source realms, elemental nations, type, perseverance epic, unseen moon court, type, stagnant elegy. Current location, tangled Weald, type, fractured romance. Query is broad. Please specify. Naruto blinked. It had categorized their entire lives in seconds. We need to get home. Safely. And we need to understand the bond between us. What it is. If it's dangerous. The orb brightened. 2 queries. Interlinked. Follow. It floated off down the aisle. They followed, their footsteps eerily silent on the dark wood. The orb led them through a maze of towering shelves, past sections that hummed with epic energy, others that wept softly, some that crackled with static. They passed a corridor where the books were cages containing tiny, living storms, another where they were mirrors reflecting endless iterations of the same knight slaying the same dragon. Finally, they entered a smaller, circular chamber. The shelves here were of warm, honey-colored wood. The artifacts were less intimidating: clay tablets, woven tapestries, simple parchment codices. In the center was a large, wooden table and 2 chairs that looked disconcertingly normal. The annals of emergent phenomena, the orb intoned, and the marginalia on interdimensional ethics. Please be seated. The relevant narratives will be presented. 2 items floated from the shelves. One was a slate tablet that began to etch itself with lines of light as they watched. The other was a delicate mobile made of crystal and silver wire, which began to turn slowly, casting prismatic patterns on the table. Consequence: they had asked for answers. The library would provide. But stories, once known, cannot be unknown. The truth could be a shackle as easily as a key. They sat. The slate presented its information not in words, but in symbolic, evolving diagrams. It showed 2 distinct energy signatures, a golden sun and a silver moon, colliding. Then, a third braided pattern emerged, vibrant and unstable. Annotations appeared like footnotes. Symbiotic resonance. High cohesion. Vulnerability, narrative rejection. It says our bond is strong. Elara translated, her finger tracing the braided light. But it's an anomaly. Stories, the fundamental rules of realms, might try to correct it. To force us back into established roles, the sun hero, the moon princess, or erase us. The mobile chimed softly. Its turning crystals refracted light into a tiny, 3-dimensional scene above the table. It showed two figures, stylized sun and moon icons, using their braided energy to create a rift. Then, the scene split into branches. One branch showed the rift stabilizing, becoming a bridge. The other branch showed the rift collapsing, the backlash unraveling the braid and scattering their essences into the void. Using our bond to travel is possible, Naruto murmured, watching the catastrophic branch with a sinking heart. But it's a gamble every time. The more we do it, the higher the chance of a critical failure. The orb pulsed. Conclusion: your bond is a nascent narrative archetype. The union of sun and root. It is unwritten. Its ending is undefined. To travel safely, you must strengthen the narrative. Give it coherence. A shared purpose beyond mere survival. Strengthen how? Elara asked. Through ratified choice, the orb replied. The library can facilitate a binding of intent. A mutual declaration that codifies your shared narrative direction. It would function as a rudimentary plot, granting your bond stability and a measure of resistance to external narrative forces. Micro cliffhanger, a contract. A magical, narrative vow. Naruto's mind flashed to the countless vows he made, to bring Sasuke back, to become Hokage, to protect the village. Those were singular. This would be a vow with someone. A joint destiny. What are the terms? He asked, his voice tight. The slate wiped clean and presented new symbols. A scale balanced two concepts, autonomy and unity. A path split from the scale. One fork led to a merged, single icon. The other fork showed two distinct icons walking parallel paths, connected by a bright thread. The binding can take two forms, the orb explained. Symbiosis, a deep merging of purposes and, to a degree, identities. Highest stability, lowest individual flexibility. Or alliance, a sworn pact of mutual aid towards a defined goal. Higher individual freedom, lower narrative stability. It was the fundamental question of their entire precarious relationship boiled down to a magical contract. Were they becoming one entity? Or were they two allies with an unbreakable link? They looked at each other across the table. The bond hung between them, full of her quiet strength and his stubborn fire, her grief for Oak and Lily and his guilt over leaving them, their shared fear and their shared, defiant hope. We are not one person, Elara said slowly, as if realizing it herself. I do not wish to be consumed by your sunlight, nor do I think you wish to be gentled by my moonlight. No, Naruto agreed, relief and a strange disappointment mixing in his chest. But I don't want to be just allies either. Not after everything. The orb pulsed, waiting. Risky choice, Naruto reached across the table. Elara met him halfway, their hands clasping over the swirling symbols. We choose the thread, he said, his eyes on hers. Not the merge. We stay us. But we swear to protect each other's us until we find a way home. To make our choices together. To be partners. In this. The word partners hung in the silent air. It was more intimate than allies, less final than symbiosis. It was a promise of equality, of shared burden. Elara's green eyes were luminous. She nodded. We bind our intent. To protect each other's autonomy. To seek a resolution that honors both our worlds. To use our bond not as a weapon first, but as a shelter. As they spoke, the symbols on the slate reacted. The scale dissolved. The two distinct icons on the parallel path brightened, and the thread between them thickened, becoming a braided cord of gold and green. The crystal mobile chimed a clear, beautiful note. A warmth spread from their clasped hands, up their arms, and settled deep in their cores. It wasn't the wild, chaotic braid of before. It was a structured, agreed-upon circuit. A treaty written in their very souls. The orb dimmed. Binding of intent ratified. Narrative archetype, the sundered moon's sunkeeper. Stability increased by 47%. You may now access the cartography of narrative currents for safer travel. A new item floated from the shelves, a large, blank vellum map. As it unrolled on the table, ink bloomed across it in real time, drawing not landmasses, but swirling currents, eddies, and nodes of light labeled with story types. Chapter 9, The Ink of Unmaking. The archivist moved with a silence that was deeper than the library's hush. It was an erasure of sound. Its blank oval face drank the light, and its coat of solidified silence seemed to fray the edges of reality around it. The drip of its void black quill was the only punctuation in the terror. You have written upon yourselves, the archivist intoned, its voice leaching the warmth from the air. You have created a marginal note that threatens to bleed onto the master page. This is not permitted. Emotional desire. In that moment, Naruto and Elara's desires fused into a single, crystalline point, preservation. Not just of their lives, but of the bond they had just solemnized, the fragile, sundered moon's sunkeeper. Pact that represented their hard-won choice. They would not be unmade. Not now. Barrier. This was not a foe of flesh and blood or wild magic. This was a custodian of stories. It didn't fight with force, but with negation. How did one battle a living eraser? The archivist raised its quill. It did not strike at them. It wrote in the air. A slash of black ink appeared, hanging in the space between them. Where it hung, the newly sworn bond, the warm, braided circuit they had just felt settle, frayed. A thread of gold unspooled from Naruto's core with a painful, tearing sensation. A strand of green withered in Elara's spirit. The connection didn't break, but it screamed in dissonance. Naruto reacted on pure instinct. He couldn't punch a concept. But he could fight for what was his. He pushed chakra, not in an attack, but in a reinforcement of the bond. He poured his will, his memory of the vow, his promise of partnership, down the fraying connection, trying to re-ink the unwritten line. Elara did the same. She didn't try to shield herself. She fed her magic into the bond, reinforcing it with the memory of her choice in the glade, her decision in the spire, the feeling of his hand in hers as they stepped into the vortex. Her magic was of growth and preservation. She grew the bond back, faster than the ink could dissolve it. The archivist paused, its blank face somehow conveying surprise. The ink slash dissolved. Resilient marginalia. It murmured, a note of clinical interest in its desiccating voice. The substrate is self-reinforcing. A recursive narrative. It took a step closer. The chill intensified. This time, it pointed the quill not at the space between them, but directly at Elara. It began to write a single, complex rune in the air before her. Elara felt it immediately. Not an attack on the bond, but on her context. The rune sought her story, the stagnant elegy of the unseen moon. It tried to define her, to recatalogue her as a wayward princess, to be shelved under containment. If that definition stuck, it would overwrite her. She would forget the hidden garden, the defiance, the warmth of sunlight. She would remember only duty and her failure to uphold it. No! Naruto didn't think. He threw himself not at the archivist, but into the path of the forming rune. He took the brunt of the defining ink on his own chest. Agony. It was not physical. It was categorical. The ink tried to write him into her story, to define him as a catalyst of discord, to be expunged. It was a narrative attack, trying to turn him into a plot device in her tragedy, to reduce their complex partnership to a simple cause and effect of ruin. But Naruto Uzumaki had spent his life defying definitions. Orphan. Demon. Hero. Hokage. He was a palimpsest of stories written over each other. The archivist's single, neat rune splashed against the chaotic, layered epic of his life and failed to cohere. The ink sizzled, confused, and dripped harmlessly to the floor, where it dissolved a small circle of wood into non-existence. Risky choice, the archivist recoiled, its blank face tilting. Incompatible narrative density. It hissed, frustrated. Elara saw their opening. The archivist was a being of order, of neat categorization. Their strength was their messiness, their unresolved, braided nature. They couldn't fight it with a better story. They had to fight it with anti-story. Naruto! She cried. The bond! Don't defend it! Jam it! He understood instantly. Instead of reinforcing the clean, sworn bond of their pact, he dove into the raw, untamed, emotional undercurrent beneath it, the homesickness, the guilt over Oak and Lily, the terrifying attraction, the sheer, bewildering joy of not being alone. He blasted this chaotic, unbidden, unwritten emotional torrent down the connection to Elara. She received it and amplified it, weaving in her own chaos, the shameful relief of exile, the dizzying fear of freedom, the electric thrill of his churka in her veins, the unresolved grief for the court that was both prison and home. She mixed it with the wild, untamed magic of her hidden garden, the kind that grew thorns and nightshade alongside healing herbs. Together, they took this roiling, indigestible mass of unresolved feeling and pure, chaotic potential and shoved it back along the line the archivist's presence had created, the line it was using to perceive and categorize them. It was like feedback from a broken instrument. A scream of raw, unstructured life. Consequence, the archivist shuddered. Its coat of silence rippled. The blank oval of its face crackled with static, flashes of incongruent images. A ramen bowl, a moonflower, a child's laughter, a silent scream. It couldn't process. Its quill hand trembled. A drop of ink fell and instead of unmaking, it created a tiny, absurd patch of wildly spinning color that immediately died. Cease, it whispered, its voice glitching. Nonlinear, paradoxical data. It wasn't hurt. It was confused. Profoundly, existentially confused. For a being whose purpose was to sort and shelve, their deliberate emission of unsortable chaos was a weapon of mass disruption. Micro cliffhanger. Now! Naruto grabbed Elara's hand. They didn't run for the door. They ran for the map on the table. The cartography of narrative currents. Naruto's free hand slammed down on the node labeled Lucid Dreams, Realm of Reflection. He poured chakra into the map, not to read it, but to activate it. A travel spell, using the library's own tools. Elara added her will, her magic keyed to the intent of passage. The map glowed. The inked current swam, and the node under Naruto's hand brightened like a beacon. The archivist was recovering, its form restabilizing. It raised its quill for a final, decisive stroke of absolute unwriting. The world around the table warped. The polished wood, the shelves, the very light bent inward towards the map. A vortex, but this one was smooth, silent, and colored like shifting watercolor washes. A narrative current, caught and harnessed. They were pulled in just as the archivist's quill completed its stroke. A line of absolute nothingness cut through the space where they'd been standing, severing the table in two with a sound like a forgotten idea. But they were already gone, swept into the gentle, surreal flow of the lucid dream current. The transition was soft, like waking from a deep sleep. The oppressive silence of the library was replaced by a low, melodic hum. The harsh light became a diffuse, pearlescent glow. They landed on something soft and yielding. Blinking, they found themselves in a field of giant, silken pillows and muted pastel colors, under a sky that swirled with slow-moving clouds shaped like memories and half-formed thoughts. In the distance, structures shifted, a castle made of stained glass one moment, a simple wooden hut the next. The air smelled of lavender and distant rain. The realm of reflection. A place where stories weren't catalogued, but dreamt. For a long moment, they just lay where they'd fallen, side by side on a giant cerulean cushion, breathing heavily. The confrontation had lasted less than a minute, but it had been the most existentially terrifying fight of their lives. Slowly, Naruto propped himself up on an elbow. He looked at Elara. Her eyes were closed, but tears were leaking from beneath her lids, tracing paths through the dust of the library and the between. "Hey," he said softly, his voice rough. "You okay?" She opened her eyes. They were wide, haunted. "It tried to unwrite me. To make me a footnote in my own tragedy." She turned her head to look at him. You took its writing from me." "It didn't stick," he said, offering a weak grin. "Because you are gloriously, infuriatingly impossible to define." A faint, trembling smile touched her lips. "Thank you?" He didn't say you're welcome. The moment was too vast for platitudes. He just nodded. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the raw, shared intimacy of their chaotic counterattack. They had shown each other the unfiltered basements of their souls, the messy, frightened, yearning parts they kept hidden even from themselves. There were no secrets left in the aftermath of that psychic scream. Risky choice, the silence that stretched between them now was charged. Not with fear, but with a profound, terrifying vulnerability. The braid of their bond, reforged after the assault, hummed with a new, deeper harmony. It wasn't just a pact anymore. It was a shared scar. Naruto reached out, his hand hovering near her face. He didn't touch her. It was a question. Elara's green eyes watched his hand, then lifted to his. Her own desire was a mirror of his, for anchoring. For a touch that was not about survival, or magic, or vows, but about simple, physical confirmation that they were both still here, still real. She gave a barely perceptible nod. His callous thumb brushed away the tear track on her cheek. The contact was electric, but in a completely new way. It wasn't the shock of merging energies. It was the shock of pure, unmediated tenderness. Her skin was impossibly soft. She leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a second, a sigh escaping her. He leaned in. Or she did. It was impossible to tell. The space between them dissolved. The kiss was not fiery or desperate. It was slow. Searching. A question and an answer in one. He tasted of sunlight and stubborn hope. She tasted of moonlight and deep, quiet strength. Their bonded energies didn't flare, they sighed, settling into a contented, resonant hum that vibrated through their joined lips, down their spines, into the very core of the dreaming realm around them. The pillows beneath them grew warmer. The clouds above shaped themselves into abstract patterns of gold and green. It was a choice. The most deliberate one yet. Not for survival, or strategy, or to defy a fate. It was a choice for this. For the connection that had grown in the cracks between worlds. It was love, not as a sudden bolt, but as the inevitable, terrifying bloom of a seed planted in shared defiance, and watered with shared tears. When they finally parted, foreheads resting together, the world had changed. The realm of reflection had solidified around their shared emotion. The shifting castle in the distance had settled into a beautiful, impossible structure, part Hokage Tower's warm wood and ivy, part Moon Spire's elegant silver grace, entwined with the vibrant, growing wildness of her hidden garden. It was a home that could never exist, a monument to their union.